Guys, what is up? So I touched on this a little briefly in the pulling ball rap video that I did, but I feel like this should be addressed way more than I did. So if you do not know, a Saudi citizen who is a U.S. permanent resident went to Turkey and he went into the Saudi Arabian embassy, and within hours he was gone. Nobody had heard from him. He had never left the embassy, and he was killed. So the man that was killed, his name was Jamal Khashoggi, and he was a writer for the Washington Post, and he was a critic of the new Crown Prince. I forget his actual name. I know he's known as like MSB or something like that. The new Crown Prince, and many people suspect that he was killed by Saudi Arabia, by the government. The new Crown Prince, a lot of people thought that he was going to be a big change in Saudi Arabia. He allowed women to drive, and he also had this big plans for freeing up the state control of the economy a little bit more. And he also wanted to move Saudi Arabia off of oil. I forget it's like Project Riyadh or the 30 Years Project. I forget what it's called, but yeah, had that big project. He wanted to make like a whole new city and stuff. So he appeared to be really good, but from what we have seen with the killing of this journalist, he is not taking any flack. He really wants to clamp down on criticism of him, and most of these changes really just appear to be superficial, just to boost himself up. Honestly, it's like the changes in China. It's just we're gonna push economic growth, but we're clamping down on civil rights, and what little progress we do make is mostly going to just be for show. But this was a really bold move on Saudi Arabia's part. And their little test of just seeing how far they could go with killing a dissident, um, it actually paid off. Why? Because of who's in charge of the U.S. right now. But I'm not going to deny what happened really was a product of just how the U.S. Saudi Arabia relations have been going. Because since we've had relations with Saudi Arabia, we've basically just wanted their oil and wanted to sell them weapons, and we were willing to turn a blind eye to whatever they wanted to do, even though they completely stood against our values. And honestly, even even directly funding terrorists, we were still willing to turn the blind eye to that in the Bush years and even the Obama years and in the Trump years. That's really why Saudi Arabia knew that they could get away with this, because the U.S. would still support them. Turkey is not happy at all. Turkey's geopolitical situation, honestly, they really feel like they can't trust anybody at this point. I mean, Russia's incursions, the U.S. kind of is an ally, but they haven't really been seeing too much eye to eye recently with the whole conflict in Syria. Europe does not really like Turkey anymore, especially since considering Erdogan has effectively become a dictator at this point. I feel like Turkey's just going to feel way more just attacked, and it's probably going to get way more aggressive in the future years, as it'll feel it needs to protect itself. But also, this is really a tragedy because he was a U.S. permanent resident. He was an employee of an American company, and Saudi Arabia still felt like they had the power and influence to do this, which they have proof that they really can, because there's really no U.S. retaliation for this. We're just willing to accept the lie that they told us that, oh, the guy just died while we questioned him, happened to die while we questioned him. I mean, even though there's literal proof that the people brought bone saws there, there were 15 assassins sent there. They were sent on a private plane, and then the Turkish authorities inspected that plane. They didn't find anything, so they still let them leave. Which I felt that they shouldn't have. I mean, if I were Turkey, I definitely would have put my foot down and said, no, you cannot leave, but they got away. The whole embassy is being questioned. Turkish authorities have gone in and tried to find any forensic evidence that they could have. But yeah, this just goes to show you how much we are willing to really sacrifice our values for money, and it's pretty despicable.